Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, episode 21. I'm Scott Davenport. Today's topic is photography is so much more than just photos. Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. I'm happy to be back for another week to talk about photography. And in this episode, we collectively answer a question. What has photography given you beyond just the photographs? It's a question I posed in episodes 17 and 19 of this podcast, and also to our Patreon community. And thank you very much for each of you that sent in your thoughts. Your thoughts were quite interesting, insightful, and surprising at times. And today I'll share what you shared. 5 things. 5 things photography has given us beyond the photographs. If you enjoy today's podcast, please share it with a friend. And if you have a story to share about your photography, leave a comment at stopdownpodcast.com or use the contact form on the website. I'd like to hear from you. So, what has photography given us beyond the photographs? As it turns out, a lot. A lot more than 5. I've picked out 5 that really bubbled up to the top. Number 1, photography gives us a different way of seeing the world. This was a through line in most of the responses. Just about every photographer that wrote in shared this thought or something very, very similar to it. I think we're all channeling Dorothea Lange. She said, a camera is a tool for learning how to see without a camera. So even when our cameras are in the bag, being a photographer makes you see the world differently. You see light, texture, patterns, smaller details. If you're like me, you're almost always silently composing things, mentally repositioning yourself or moving objects around in your head just to make something a little more of a pleasing or interesting photograph. Several of you spoke about a sense of discovery. Everything from wanting to visit a far-off place that's beautiful to go and make photographs, to discovering things that are right in your own backyard, right in your hometown you'd never seen before and may not have ever sought out if it weren't for photography, or rediscovering a familiar place in different lighting or different weather. The experience of a familiar location can be enriched as a result of being a photographer. Another sub-theme to this different way of seeing the world was just the appreciation of being there, feeling a gentle breeze rush through the forest, the smell of salt in the air at the ocean, simply watching the sunrise or sunset from wherever you are, whether or not you have the camera, whether you've gone out to make the photo or you're just out in the world. Just being there can be as equally rewarding as a good photograph. So photography teaches us to enjoy the world, enjoy life just a little bit more. Number 2, photography has led to new friendships. This was another common one. Photography leads to friendships, and I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I'll guess it's something that just about everyone has experienced. Photography being a common interest, it bonds people together. It's certainly true for me. What I find quite interesting is many of the friendships folks talked about were with people you otherwise probably would have never met. Different people from different places, different backgrounds. Maybe you met them on a workshop. Maybe you just happened across them out in the field. And each person has their own different way of seeing the world, just like we just talked about. When that happens, you get this cross-section of humanity. Your worldview grows. It opens your eyes to how wide and varied the world is. I think that's a wonderful byproduct of photography. So new friends is definitely a gift given by the pursuit of photography. The third thing photography has given us beyond the photographs, a bridge to new interests or fuel for existing ones. I'll use a personal example for new interests. My photography in the early days was squarely rooted in capturing still photos, a still frame to get a single scene. As time marched on, as time tends to do, I started getting into video, and now I quite enjoy making video projects. I arguably spend more time thinking about video concepts, jump cuts, B-rolls, framing for behind-the-scenes video than I do about the still photos. Video is still a very new area for me, so there's a lot to learn. But that grew out of photography, capturing stills. Several of you that wrote in spoke of existing hobbies, be it history, travel, geology, and those intertwining with photography and getting to approach an existing interest from a photographic angle and how that enriched things overall. Take history, for example. You have an interest in a certain historical time period. So you research, you read, you absorb information about that. Then you start introducing photography into the mix. Well, now you want to go visit these places, capture images of those places. What's kind of cool is you're going to first spawn probably a photo project, and that introduces a feedback loop, right? You're photographing things in the pursuit of capturing the images. You probably will learn more about the history of a place or a person that can branch into new ideas of a photo project. But also, when you're doing the photography part of it, you're starting to add to the narrative of that history. You're no longer just reading and absorbing. You're producing something else that may become part of that narrative overall. So photography is an interesting way that it will fuel and enrich an existing hobby or an existing passion. As I said, in my example, it bridged to a brand new interest for something that I probably otherwise wouldn't have embarked on. Number 4 is a new appreciation for cinema. Now, this one snuck up on me. When I read this in one reply, in my head, it's like, oh yeah, I am totally on board with this. Watching a movie is a very different experience once photography is under your skin. You realize how much storytelling is done through framing, angles, composition, the color grading. Are things over or under saturated? Is it a really dark and moody film where things are, it's like, variation shades of black? I'm thinking of Game of Thrones as I say that. That was a very dark series filmed in a very dark way. But all of the visuals beyond the actors and their dialogue that convey the story that a director wants to tell. Building on that and connected with my own video work, I have a much deeper appreciation for film editors. How a film is cut together plays a huge role in a story being told. And this is one of those places, again, where this feedback loop to photography can form. If you're doing a multi-photo project, say 6 photos, 8 photos, telling the story of an event or a place, how those photos are arranged, which photos get selected to tell that story, that really has an impact. And you can learn certain things from cinema, apply them to photography, and I'm sure vice versa. So appreciation for cinema, film editors, definitely something else that photography gives us. The 5th and last item on our list of things photography has given us beyond the photographs is continued learning. I was so glad when others wrote in and said this same thing, because I really like that photography is open-ended. There's always something new to learn. And just within a single genre, landscape photography, that's my wheelhouse. There's so much to learn. Camera settings for different scenes. Seascapes versus a snowy mountain versus a chaotic forest, an urban landscape, astrophotography. Why do some settings work for one situation but not another? When do you break the rules? How do filters work? How do I make a good panorama? How does weather affect the scene? And actually, that connects into the 3rd item. If you're learning about weather patterns because photography becomes a bridge to learning something else, maybe you start to try to predict the weather. You get weather apps. You're into astrophotography. You learn about the night sky and the wobble of the planets and how that affects where the stars are in a given season. It's a fantastic thing about photography. And that's just one genre. Take that and multiply it by macro and portrait and street and all the other things we have in photography. A huge open field for learning. Another thing that is great about continued learning is it keeps us engaged. We stay active mentally and physically. We're keeping our brain active, keeping our body active, keeping engaged, and that's good for our health and for our longevity. So yes, continued learning is definitely something I think is a great gift that photography gives us beyond a photograph. To recap it, the 5 things that photography gives us beyond photographs. Number 1, a different way of seeing the world. Number 2, new friendships. Number 3, a springboard to new interests or a way to enrich existing interests. Number 4, a new appreciation for cinema and film editors. And number 5, never-ending learning. Now, there are certainly many other things beyond this list of 5. Some things that folks wrote in about giving back to the community, self-expression, self-realization, studying your own work to realize more about yourself. The list goes on and on. So if you have something to add to the list, leave a comment on stopdownpodcast.com. I'd like to hear from you. I want to thank the members of the Patreon community. Your support makes this podcast possible. If you're interested in learning about the Patreon community, check the show notes, and there's a support the show button on all pages of stopdownpodcast.com where you can learn more about it. And that will wrap up this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please share it with a friend. I'm looking forward to next week's topic, and until then, my name's Scott Davenport. Have fun.